There are a number of give us information to support you in advocacy, and what needs to happen can only be handled one-on-one. So let me invite you to talk to Florence, who knows officers right now. But I leave it in the hands of Dr. Kisa.
The tax burden has been occasioned by various initiatives and changes in the tax regime. So in our engagement with the CS Treasury, National Treasury, we had a whole raft of proposals that called upon a review of the tax regime. In particular, we highlighted the fact that employers are struggling to meet the demands of the Employment Act, that employees take home 1/3 of their salaries as income. We looked at the total range of statutory deductions that have been reviewed or reintroduced, and requested, one, that this be based on the basic pay as opposed to the consolidated pay, because we think that will alleviate the level of cash that is flowing out of people's payrolls. And also we looked at the housing levy, which has been quite significant at 1.5% on the total earnings, and proposed that that could be reduced to 0.5%, because we know that a good amount of money has been raised already to cover the housing aspirations of the government. We looked at SHA, where employees are contributing 2.7%, but the implementation of SHA has faced a lot of challenges. This is in the public domain, and requested that those issues be addressed so as to alleviate the suffering of Kenyans when they need medical care, and so that SHA can work well enough to be able to cover people when they are ill. Because what is happening is that we are paying towards it but not getting those benefits, which means you're paying twice. And overall, there's a whole raft of taxes that were introduced, which we highlighted and requested that this be reviewed. On job losses, it is a reflection of the state of enterprises and the challenges that they are facing. In the survey that we conducted last year, we highlighted that there were over 5,000 jobs that had been lost. And of course, we've seen more jobs being lost since then, more enterprises closing down. In this region in particular, enterprises have also closed down. So we need to look at the state of businesses and why businesses are closing down or relocating or reducing their workforce to be able to keep people in jobs. So for us, it boils down to supporting enterprises to be competitive, and we've highlighted some of the challenges enterprises and sectors in this region are facing. This region is very reliant on the port, so efficiency of the port, if you can't sell tea, and if you don't make it easier for tourists to come and stay in Kenya, then you're making it difficult for businesses. So it's a whole host of interventions that FKE is engaging on, so that we can get some reprieve for businesses to, first of all, contain the job losses, but secondly, also to allow businesses to meet the demands of all the taxes that they're supposed to meet, and also the administrative burden could also be made easier. Okay. Over the last 1 year, the Federation has been very clear and consistent about the urgent need for a favorable, stable, and predictable business environment. Early this year, we gave out the results of a survey which we conducted last year in 2024, which showed that generally 2024 posed significant challenges for businesses, including low demand, liquidity constraints, rising costs of doing business, a challenging tax regime, frequent legislative changes, a shrinking market, and loss of competitiveness for many enterprises. These challenges strained employers, reduced productivity, and hindered job creation. They also led to many cases of redundancies, the closure of many enterprises, and overall difficulty on the part of employers to meet the compliance requirements, particularly under the Employment Act 2007, on the 1/3 rule, which basically says that employees should take home 1/3 of their salary as net pay. So the survey that the Federation conducted last year showed that generally employers thought that the business conditions were getting worse, We had a very good response from our membership. Over 500 employers responded, and the areas they highlighted were the high taxes, the job losses, the unfavorable policies, and instability generally. We therefore called on the government as employers to reduce the tax burden, because over 60% of our members said this was the main thing. They also needed stability in the business environment. This has therefore informed the Federation's engagement and statements that we have made in our efforts to improve the business environment, but we also appreciate the efforts that the government has made in addressing some of these issues, but the results have been mixed. Notably, we note that two sectors in particular, tourism and hospitality sectors, have seen improvement, driven largely by the post-COVID recovery action plan that they put in place. So what we want to discuss today is how these gains can be sustained, and for this region in particular, the Federation urges the government to liberalize travel, to further liberalize travel, and this should include visa-free entry for transit passengers in particular and visitors who are staying here in Kenya for less than 96 hours. And we believe the other action that is needed is for the government to enhance air access into Kenya. On fiscal responsibility, especially as we are facing the budget 2025-2026, we are requesting the government to consider the recommendations that we submitted to the CS Treasury earlier this year, aimed at reducing the tax burden on citizens and businesses. We do know that many Kenyans, many businesses feel that their issues have not been adequately addressed, and that there's a lot more that needs to be done to reduce the heavy burden of taxation on businesses and also on the ordinary Kenyan, to help them to make ends meet. So we hope that the Treasury, based on the discussions we had with them earlier this year, which were very cordial discussions, will address some of these issues. Looking at the coast region, which is a pillar of Kenya's economy, and it is a home to key sectors such as shipping and logistics, the port operations, tourism, fishing, agriculture, tea trade, mining, and manufacturing. All these sectors contribute significantly to national development, but they continue to face structural, regulatory, and policy challenges, which need to be urgently addressed. We want to commend, at the same time, the efforts that have been made, particularly on infrastructure, through developments such as the Dongo Kundu Bridge, which has improved connectivity and logistics within the coast region. Similarly, the ongoing efforts to upgrade the Malindi-Mombasa Road are welcome, and we emphasize the need to fast-track construction of the Mombasa-Nairobi Road to ease persistent congestion and enhance the efficiency of trade and transport corridors. We also want to talk about the tea sector in particular. We are deeply concerned about the ban by the government of Sudan on Kenyan tea imports since March 11 this year. This unilateral action has caused losses estimated at 2.4 billion Kenya shillings, with our tea stuck at Port Sudan on vessels en route or warehoused in Mombasa. So we call upon the government of Kenya to engage Sudan urgently and diplomatically to resolve this issue and restore market access so that we can sell our tea. Furthermore, the Kenya shilling 7,000 cess per truck imposed by Mombasa County government continues to burden the tea value chain, despite similar charges being declared unconstitutional. So this acts as a non-tariff barrier and is in direct violation of the East African Community EAC trade protocols. We also raise concern over the transit bond requirements imposed on tea from neighboring countries sold via the Mombasa tea auction. These conditions create unfair trade barriers and risk undermining Mombasa's competitiveness as a regional trade hub. On technical education and capitation inequities, we wish to draw attention to the government policy which is excluding university-based TVET students from capitation. despite similar programs in standalone institutions receiving funding. This undermines the development of a skilled workforce and contradicts Kenya's industrialization agenda. We urge the government to rectify this policy so that these TVET-based students can get money to support them in their education. We also request for extending capitation to all TVET students in accredited institutions, regardless of the host structure. There's also need to expand access so that we have student loans and scholarships funded. On port infrastructure and labor challenges, we want to highlight the fact that the Port of Mombasa is approaching its capacity limit, while the Port of Lamu remains underutilized due to poor interland connectivity. Without urgent investments to support infrastructure, such as warehousing and logistics hubs, the region's competitiveness is at risk. The maritime and logistics sectors also face shortage of skilled professionals, such as marine engineers and port pilots. There's poor succession planning, exacerbated by a freeze on public recruitment, and low morale among workers, worsened by an increasing tax burden with no wage growth. So employers from this region feel that there's need for a new approach at national level to reform HR frameworks, rebuild workplace culture, and incentivize employment in critical sectors. We also want to highlight the logistics bottlenecks and the KRA weekend gaps. Transporters and warehouse operators continue to incur avoidable costs due to delays in disarming cargo container seals by KRA officers, especially on weekends and public holidays. We call for immediate deployment of round-the-clock customs support to ensure continuity of cargo movement and reduce business losses. Regarding the new tariffs by the USA, this has impacted areas of agriculture, manufacturing, and trade exports in particular. It is important for the government to pursue and strengthen preferential trade agreements with other countries. This is particularly urgent considering the tariffs recently imposed by the US government and growing restrictions from other trading partners that Kenya has traditionally relied on. Strategic international trade engagement is essential to safeguard market access, enhance competitiveness, and protect the livelihoods tied to export-driven industries in this region.
You mentioned your name and the media.
Thank you very much.